Hello everyone, welcome to a very unique episode of the Ravens Writing Room. For the first time in a long time, I was actually given a question to answer and I thought it would make a good writing room episode. The question was asked about two anime that I have watched, at least through their first seasons, Goblin Slayer and The Rising of the Shield Hero. Both are high fantasy anime series that follow a male protagonist who is generally looked down upon by society, but uses cleverness and unique abilities to solve their problems, as well as having a handful of loyal friends to assist them. I enjoy both series to some extent, though I confess I prefer Goblin Slayer for reasons I can get into another time. But for this video, I was asked specifically about two scenes from both. At a certain point in both series, the main characters, Goblin Slayer and Naofumi, both have something of a second wind that allows them to escape and overcome a near-death situation. However, both are quite different in execution, and understanding their differences will not only reveal which one was handled better, but which one should be emulated. Before we can begin, though, there's an obvious question that needs to be asked. Why should we compare these two scenes? What if the story I'm writing doesn't involve a second wind scene like this? Because, in the world of action anime or TV, second wind scenes are great means of demonstrating several variables of your character. Motivation, abilities, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, hidden strengths, and even themes. We'll be exploring these as we go, so let's get started. We will begin by analyzing Goblin Slayer. In Goblin Slayer, this is the story of a lone warrior simply named Goblin Slayer. I know, very creative. Though a high-ranking adventurer, the only thing he's interested in is killing goblins.
Oh, good morning, Goblin Slayer. It's so nice to see you.
Are there any quests that involve goblins?
Small, greenish, impish creatures that most other adventurers don't even bother with, considering them lesser creatures. Because of his obsession with only killing goblins, most other adventurers give him a wide berth and think little of him.
The Goblin Slayer?
That's him.
He's the weirdo who only takes goblin-related missions.
That big idiot gives silver ranks like us a bad name.
Even our equipment is better than what he's carrying.
However, over the course of the show, he makes a few allies who understand the threat goblins pose and seek to not only help him in fighting these monsters, but also help him break out of his reclusive lifestyle.
Well, it's just, I don't know if you've heard, but we took on a new quest surveying some ruins.
I see.
So, it's possible we'll ask for your help or something.
In episode 7, Onward Unto Death, Goblin Slayer and his party have gone into an underground waterway under a city to deal with a goblin infestation. They end up in a trap laid by the goblins in which they are attacked and forced on the defensive. Leading the goblins is a massive brute called a Goblin Champion, who proves to be an incredibly formidable opponent. Goblin Slayer tries to engage the monster but is struck with a lethal blow and is left sprawled in a pile of rubble, coughing up blood and dying.
Goblin Slayer!
Say something, Orkbog! Are you hurt?
Seeing their leader in this state causes panic in his comrades, and the goblins quickly begin to overwhelm them. As the screams of his comrades and the laughter of the goblins fills his ears, he suddenly has flashbacks to his own sister and village being killed by goblins, and the voice of an unknown person can be heard in his ears.
You think you have the strength to slay goblins? You just sat there and watched while they raped and pillaged. You are powerless.
Goblin Slayer then rises, dying and bleeding, and then using the hair of a corpse they came across earlier, he climbs onto the champion's back and begins to strangle him with the hair, commenting deviously.
I've heard the weapon of choice for some assassins is rope made of human hair. Now I see why. It doesn't break easily. The ultimate way to crush someone's neck.
In a violent and vicious struggle against his own death and against the impossible odds, Goblin Slayer finally gets the upper hand.
Now, goblins, take a good look!
With the champion running away injured, the other goblins flee as well. But with the battle over, Goblin Slayer only has the strength to check on his party before collapsing, ending the episode and leaving us fearful for his fate. This scene accomplishes several things. Firstly, it reinforced the threat goblins pose, showing us once again that even experienced adventurers can be overwhelmed by them. We also were shown a new threat in the Goblin Champion, something we were not aware existed before, but seeing as we were introduced to hobgoblins in a previous episode, the idea of a Goblin Champion isn't impossible. We also have shown a bit of Goblin Slayer's history. We know that his village and sister were killed by goblins, but we did not know about the strange voice that spoke to him. This master, as he will be revealed to us, will play a role in the showing of a piece of Goblin Slayer's training, background, and motivations. We are also shown the cleverness of Goblin Slayer, using hair as a garrote wire to strangle his enemy. But more importantly than that, we are reminded of one of the crucial themes of the anime, the defiance of fate. Goblin Slayer is heavily inspired by Dungeons & Dragons. The characters have titles instead of names. Spellcasting characters can only use limited spells at a time, much like spell slots, and the lore of the show reveals that much of the world they live in is the result of gods playing a game that involves the roll of the dice.
Long, long ago, when the world was darker, the sky lit by fewer stars, the gods began to tire of the dice game that would determine who among them would hold dominion over the world.
In fact, this dice roll aspect is highlighted in every episode, in both the opening credits and in the sound effect that plays at the end of each episode. In the light novel, Goblin Slayer is actually annoying to the gods because he always resists the fate that the dice lay out for him. In this scenario, where the party's spells are exhausted and their main fighter is down, this would be the moment of death for everyone involved in most D&D campaigns. But Goblin Slayer again defies fate and death and fights to the bitter end, using a weapon not even in his inventory to defeat his foe. The themes, characters, motivations, and capabilities are all exploding in this scene, and it's incredibly satisfying to watch. And all of it comes to a severe consequence in the end, with Goblin Slayer falling as the scene ends, showing that he risked his life to save the party and may well have paid the price for it. But now, let's look at the other anime. Let's take a look at Rising of the Shield Hero. In this anime, the story revolves around Naofumi Iwatani, a mild otaku boy who gets isekai'd into a fantasy world. He, along with 3 other young men, are known as the 4 cardinal heroes, warriors who specialize in a specific weapon, the spear, sword, bow, and shield, and they are meant to fight off waves of catastrophe and defend the world. Naofumi, at first, is very happy in this new world, until he is betrayed by his party member, Princess Mine. She falsely accuses him of raping her, and it's revealed that the shield hero has always been hated by the Kingdom of Melremark.
It happened last night. The shield hero forced his way into my room. He was stinking drunk. He grabbed me and pinned me down. And then the next thing I knew, he was tearing all my clothes off.
The king, and everyone else, all believes Mine's story and shames, humiliates, and tarnishes Naofumi's name, turning him into a cynical, hateful, and brooding loner who decides to do things his way and not work with the king or the kingdom.
Mine? Why? Why would you lie like that? We're supposed to be a party! I see. Joining me was just a ruse so she could destroy me right here.
He ends up buying a slave girl to fight for him, since his shield weapon has so little attack power, and eventually purchases another female companion named Philo, who's actually a giant bird. It's complicated. The small party travel around the kingdom righting wrongs for money and trying to help the citizens who the king has mostly ignored or simply doesn't care about. In episode 8, Cursed Shield, Naofumi and his party, Philo and Raftalia, go to a village cursed with plague. The cause is a rotting dragon corpse on top of a mountain. Its body is decomposing and causing illness. Naofumi and the girls go to dispose of the body, but in the process, the dragon corpse rises and fights. Philo, who has a hatred for dragons, attacks too early and is incidentally eaten by the dragon.
Philo! Don't fight it alone! If we don't get away and regroup, we're finished! We gotta go, Raftalia! Philo, come on! That idiot! Hey, Philo!
The sight causes Naofumi to briefly have memories of Philo before lamenting.
Again? Am I going to lose it all again? Is this world going to take everything from me again?
As he has this thought, he suddenly sees a message asking, "Do you want power?" Do you hate everything? After answering to the affirmative, suddenly his shield activates the Curse series, which embodies him with an immense and dark energy. We haven't seen this before, and as he's enraptured by this power, he has memories of the king and the princess abusing him, mistreating him, and falsely accusing him. He makes comments about how he hates it all, how he hates everything.
Kill them all. Suffer.
As the dragon attempts to attack him, he easily repels all of its attacks, burning it with its failed attempts. And with each step, he has visions of the king and the princess and the other heroes as he comments that they need to be killed, smiling sadistically as he encourages their suffering. As he seems to be walking down this horrible path of sadistic hatred, he's suddenly stopped by his memory of Raftalia from earlier in the show, confirming that she trusts him and will always be by his side.
I believe you. I swear to be your sword forever.
That voice. What?
This is a world where it's hard to find people to trust, but I know I can trust you.
The memory snaps him out of his hate-filled rampage, and he sees that Raftalia has grabbed him. She is now inflicted with strange burns. Luckily, the dragon is defeated by Philo herself, who it turns out did not die, but was eating her own way out of its stomach.
Philo, you're alive! Well, it took me a little while, but I'm out.
They then hurry Raftalia back to the village to get her treated. This scene also does a few things. It introduces us to the power of the Cursed Shield, a new and unknown power of the shield that seems to be spawned from hate, and has the power to passively burn that which it touches, but as a side effect, it can leave curse damage on party members who get too close. However, this scene also has a severe drawback. Like the Goblin Slayer scene, this scene reveals the motivations of Naofumi and the themes of the show, but what were those themes? In the case of this scene, justice. Naofumi feels slighted by the actions of this world and what it's done to him, and he desires justice. He wants those who wronged him to pay for what they did, and that is revealed in the Cursed Shield summoning. Now some might argue that his behavior is simply the Cursed Shield corrupting him, but bear in mind what he said before the Cursed Shield was activated. Is this world going to take everything from me again? There is no question that Philo's apparent death affected him, but was it the primary reason for the Cursed Shield? What was playing in his mind while going on that rampage? Was it just Philo's death? Was it memories of her? No, it was every personal grievance and slight he suffered. His grievance was not necessarily the loss of Philo, but it was just another in a list of tragedies he suffered. The result does not make him look noble, but rather selfish. It is not the death of his friend that has him raging and angry, but merely another in a series of losses. Also, it was not Philo's memory that brought him back to his senses, nor was it Raftalia's current words, but the memory of her saying that she would always believe in him and stand by him. The scene has to drag us out of the present to establish not only the fuel for his rage, but also the salvation from it. None of it had to do with Philo, and that makes the audience somewhat confused to the motivations. What's worse is that the Curse Shield, despite it all, was not the saving force. Philo still saved the day by eating her way out of the dragon, meaning that the Curse Shield wasn't even necessary to this fight. So to recap, the only thing this scene did well was introduce us to a new power that would come into play later, but that power was not essential. The context behind the power's origins leave us rather uncomfortable, and there are no meaningful consequences to it, as no character died or was even near death, as the episode ends with the reveal that Raftalia will live and her treatment is quite an easy holy water purchase away.
Curing her will be difficult. She's been afflicted with a curse, and a powerful one at that. We've done what we can. We wrapped her with bandages soaked in holy water, but we don't have a holy water that's pure enough to dispel curses like this. However, if you go to a church in a big town, I know you'll find some.
So, for comparison, what do these scenes do similar? Both scenes place our character and party in a dire situation. Both involve the hero calling upon past memories or motivations to overcome their foe. Both involve anger and rage being used to dispatch the enemy. And both involve a victory for the heroes in the end over their threats. But it is where they differ that reveals the stronger writing. Let's break down the aspects of these two scenes carefully to understand why one is superior by asking several questions. First, what caused the second wind? For Goblin Slayer, he was beaten and left dying, but hearing the sounds of his party in danger dredged up memories of how he'd been powerless to save his own sister and village in the past because he'd been afraid of death and afraid to act. He wouldn't repeat that mistake, and he would go onward unto death to resist this fate and fight back.
You are powerless. Shit.
For Naofumi, was it the death of Philo? Perhaps, but as Naofumi's introducing the cursed shield, he isn't just thinking of Philo, but rather the culmination of all his past humiliations and tragedies, implying that Philo's death was the spark that activated his second wind, but not the underlying cause. Consider for a moment when Goku goes Super Saiyan. What caused that? It was the death of Krillin at the hand of Frieza. The rage he felt at Krillin's death caused him to activate Super Saiyan, because he didn't think he could get Krillin back. He thought that this was the end for Krillin, because they'd already used the Dragon Balls to wish him back once. The loss of his friend sparked a new rage in him. Imagine how different it would have been if all Goku did was remember all of his past wrongs, everything bad that ever happened to him. Doesn't that take away some of the agony that was Krillin's death? I mean, it's fine to focus on one tragedy at a time, but that's hardly relevant to this. We'll move on. The second question. How is the second wind performed? Naofumi activates a hidden power in his shield with dark capabilities. The cursed shield allows him to gain a great increase in defense and passively burn his target with curse damage, but at the cost of his composure, and also that it will harm those in his party who come too close. There is nothing wrong with a power-up for a second wind. After all, we see similar things in anime that work fine all the time. The aforementioned Goku and Super Saiyan, or Naruto and the Nine-Tailed Fox. But with Goblin Slayer, he staggers near dead to a corpse to retrieve the hair from it, and then uses it to strangle the goblin, commenting on how he's heard from someone earlier that this was a unique and useful way to assassinate. This displays a known truth about Goblin Slayer. He's resourceful and clever, using tips and tricks he picks up from others to solve his problems. Like I said, power-ups aren't inherently a bad thing, but I find far more entertainment and engagement when the character uses pre-established abilities and knowledge to win the day, as it reinforces the qualities about them we've come to appreciate. Adding a power-up makes for a gripping and impressive scene, making us appreciate the strength of the character, but it also has the potential to harm our ability to sympathize with their plight. What I mean by that is that Naofumi's greatest weakness was that his weapon has no attack power. It's purely defensive, which is why he needs party members to help him level up his shield. He can't kill monsters with it, so in order to power up and get stronger, he requires the help of others. But now, as his shield reveals more and more powerful forms that can do offensive damage, the inherent disadvantage he started with becomes less and less of a point of interest. You begin asking, is the shield really that weak? In fact, this question is later asked and answered in a future episode, when even the other heroes imply his shield is a little too strong or OP.
How about you put that shield to use? Can't it do something? Huh? I mean, that thing seems kinda overpowered.
Are you serious?
He's right. Compared to us, you're way underleveled, but you're still able to keep up. Don't you think that's because of your shield?
The weakest hero and weakest weapon is now superior to the others, even though the whole underlying point was that he required others to help him. That was one of the things I initially liked about the show. The fact that it broke a lot of isekai standards where he's not the most powerful character. He's actually the weakest, so it relies on others. He has to work with others to get by. But as the show continues, he relies on them less and less. Quite often, it's not even Raftalia or Philo who win battles for him, but him winning the battles with his shield. With Goblin Slayer, though, nothing has changed. He's still the grubby armored weirdo who fights with rusty equipment, and yet his ingenuity is still what saves the party, not his power-ups. Third question. What does the scene reveal about the characters? Second wind scenes like these are a great opportunity to remind us of what our characters value and what their motivations are. Goblin Slayer activated his because he not only wanted to kill the goblins, but because the scenario reminded him of the same night he lost his sister. In that scenario, he'd been powerless, and he wouldn't let that happen again in his lifetime. He can't allow himself to lay down and let others die. He values his comrades, and he cares about others, and he laments his own past weaknesses and won't repeat them. Now Fumi, meanwhile, goes on a tirade because his hatred for this world and the people in it, specifically the king, princess, and other heroes. He sadistically commands that they all suffer and die. What this reveals about Naofumi is his innate rage at the world and at others. His hatred fuels his action, and his power is in that instance, which makes for a dark character, but it also makes the viewer a little confused upon closer inspection. Is he not upset about Philo, or is she just another in the laundry list of losses? In fact, you'll notice that in his many flashback moments, it's not the dragon he visualizes burning, but rather Princess Mine, who wrongfully accused him of sexual assault. What this tells us inadvertently is that Philo's loss is not as impactful to him as his loss in general. He detests losing things or being hurt by this world, and this power is his way of lashing back at a world he feels wronged him. While it makes some degree of sense given his experiences, it makes us wonder about his feelings towards Philo. Does he detest the dragon for eating his friend? Or is the dragon just another part of the world that he despises, meaning his hatred for it is not quite as severe as his hatred for Mine, the king, or the other heroes? Next question. What is the end consequence of this scene? The consequence of both scenes are starkly different. For Goblin Slayer, his reckless attempts to stop the Goblin Champion and save his party lead to his near death. The episode even closes with us not knowing his fate. But more than that, it shows that Goblin Slayer is not unbeatable. It shows High Elf Archer nearly being raped by the goblins, leaving her somewhat traumatized, and it shows Priestess with a severe injury as well. The entire team is left battered, bruised, and severely out of sorts. They did not emerge unscathed from this battle despite winning it. But for Naofumi, there is no meaningful consequence. Philo not only ate her way out of the dragon, meaning the curse shield was not necessary in this fight, but she's even in a good mood when she gets out, not traumatized by anything.
But it ate you, and there was blood everywhere. Blood? Oh, that was just the fruit I threw up when the dragon gobbled me up!
Seriously, you threw up your snack?
That's so sweet of you, Master. Thank you so much for worrying about me.
Naofumi is not visibly harmed by the cursed shield or the dragon. The only one harmed in all of this is Raftalia, who was inflicted with cursed burns. But it's shown at the end of the episode that she'll be fine with the administering of holy water. At the end of the episode, Naofumi does lament that he needs to become stronger and reaffirms how he cares for his teammates, but no lasting consequence is shown as a result of this power. We're not shown that the crew needs to get stronger. If anything, we're shown that they're far stronger than we expected. And then finally, the last question. What do these scenes tell us about the themes of the show? The two themes we can take from these scenes are rather distinct. For Goblin Slayer, the theme seems to revolve around defying fate. Goblin Slayer has always been a character who defies conventional norms, rules of action, conformity, and even fate itself. Though he is skilled and intelligent, he does not pursue greater goals in life outside of goblin slaying. Though he is often put in circumstances that would fell greater heroes, he never allows himself to fail. Though he lives in a world where people specialize in one specific art, he himself uses any tool or trick to win, even if it's unconventional. And in the case of this scene, he should be dead. He should have lied there and accepted the loss and died, but instead he defied the roll of the dice and decided that he wasn't going to accept that fate, because the last time he accepted the fate in front of him, it was at the cost of his sister and his village. Now he won't allow it. But with Rising of the Shield Hero, the theme of the show itself, not the scene, but the show, could best be described as standing against authority and the subversion of hero work. Naofumi, throughout the show, is brought down by the authorities of Melremark and is often mistreated for no other reason than the fact that he's the shield hero. He's falsely accused of crimes, slandered as a deviant and a devil, reviled for taking slaves to be his party members, and hunted by authority figures, while also fixing the errors and mistakes made by his fellow cardinal heroes and resisting the royal authorities and guards of the kingdom. He also does not do any of his good deeds out of kindness, but always expects to be compensated in payment, a subversion of the selfless hero trope. However, under this cynical disposition and attitude, there is always the underlying knowledge that Naofumi does care about his party and wants to protect them. He cares deeply about Raftalia and Philo, going so far as to say that he'll pay any price to help Raftalia when she's injured, but the scene doesn't reveal that. The scene in question instead bears a theme of rageful justice, a response to the mistreatment he's suffered. His actions don't reflect pain at the loss of Philo, but anger at the injustice he suffered in his time in this world. A way to fix this scene might have been if, in his pain, Naofumi ran at the dragon recklessly trying to hit it with his shield, demanding that it give back Philo, even begging it not to take her away from him. And maybe as he screams in anger and pain at the dragon, this activates the shield and burns a literal hole through the dragon, allowing him to kill it and free Philo. The result could be that Philo is unconscious or close to death, and he runs back to the village to save her from this fate. This would have demonstrated the care he has for his friends, it would have revealed the cursed shield, and it would have helped remind us that Naofumi can put the needs of his friends and allies above his personal issues and gripes. To be perfectly honest, I would go so far as to say that the cursed shield was the beginning of the end for Rising of the Shield Hero. After it was revealed, each time it's been activated, the battle always has a repeated result. Naofumi will activate the cursed shield, a voice in his head or visions of his past will play, and will encourage him towards hatred and anger for being mistreated, and this will last for a while until Raphtalia or any of his other female friends appear to remind him that they love and support him. This will allow him to break the anger told of him, but it doesn't end the cursed shield's power. Instead, he uses it to perform ultimate finishing moves to completely destroy his enemies. Before the first season was even finished, this same thing happened 3 times. Once against the zombie dragon, once against the soul eater on the ship, and finally against the Pope. Each time the same series of events took place, and frankly, it became old news. There's more I could say about Rising of the Shield Hero, kind of deteriorating for me, but let's save that for another video. In the end, what I want you to take from this video is this. When crafting a scene or scenario, there are key factors to bear in mind. The motivations of your characters, the context of their actions and desires, the decisions they make in life or death situations, and what are the consequences of their choices. Goblin Slayer outperforms Rising of the Shield Hero because it maintained the theme of the show, maintained consistent character motivation, made use of the context of the scenario to reveal new information about our hero, and the consequences from their decisions were fierce and meaningful. Naofumi's motivations are confusing given the context of the scenario he's in. His actions were dictated by a power-up that seems out of touch with the emotion she should be feeling, which is anger instead of sorrow, and there was no meaningful consequence for this power-up or decision-making. One succeeds, the other falls short. I might need to do a whole video on why Goblin Slayer works so well, or why Rising of the Shield Hero fails halfway through Season 1, which is a real shame as I had such high hopes for it starting out. But I think we'll end the video here as I've gone quite a while, and I'm sure many people don't actually care about this topic. Thank you to all of you who did watch this video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.